Hello and welcome back to another video on Coast to Coast Hockey. Today we're going to be taking a look at what the Toronto Maple Leafs could do with their 23rd pick in the upcoming NHL Entry Draft. I'm Cameron.
And I'm Nick.
Let's get into it. So welcome into a very exciting video. It's no secret on the channel, I'm a huge Leafs fan. So all my Leafs fans out there, please thank Nick for humoring me in this video where we're going to take a look at what the Leafs can do here. He's an impartial party and he's going to bring some logic and sense to this video where I otherwise might just go off on a tangent. So thank you for that, Nick.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
All right, getting right into it, I think a good place to start is with the current prospect outlook for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So these are my personal rankings using other guys like Scott Wheeler's, Dauber Prospects, some great sources like that. Uh, Honestly, I think the Leafs prospect pool is in a pretty good place considering they're a continual playoff team.
Yeah, I'd agree. I can see a lot of these guys are starting to get to the point where it's make or break. You can see the ages there. A lot of these guys are crossing the 20 bound, so multiple years after being drafted. So guys like Matthew Nyes, Joseph Wall being 25 already. We got to figure out what's going to go on with him. But you got a bunch of guys that could slot into your the top of your AHL lineup. Some of them are already there, but some of them actually could break the NHL lineup in the next couple of years if the Leafs choose to, change things up.
Yeah, in fairness, I really tested the boundaries of what a prospect is by including Joseph Wall on here, but to be honest, like he's hardly played NHL games. Like he's played some NHL games, but that's why I feel okay including him here. But the guys who stick out to me, like obviously everybody knows what we have in Matthew Nyes. He's projecting to be a second or even first line forward in years to come. He had an impressive rookie season with some ups and downs, but impressive nonetheless. And then really emerged in the playoffs as kind of a dynamic player. Easton Cowan, everybody knows what's up with him. Unbelievable player. I believe he's almost 2 points per game in the OHL this year. What a steal of a pick it ended up being that everybody roasted at the time. And then all the goalies here too. Wall, Hildeby, Akhtemov. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing it, but there's some great goaltending depth in this prospect pool that really excites me, especially a guy like Hildeby who came over to the AHL last year, put up solid numbers. Akhtemov last year, what a year for this guy. He won VHL Goalie of the Year, which is the KHL equivalent of the AHL essentially. He was the champion then in that league and the playoff MVP. He also put up a 921 in 17 KHL games. So this guy's already coming over next year. So very exciting for Maple Leafs fans to have a goalie like that in the pipeline. Another guy to point out here is Nikita Grabyankin, who he had an incredible year as a 21-year-old in the KHL, putting up 0.61 points per game. Not quite on the level of a guy like Kirill Kaprizov, but impressive nonetheless. And he's also a champion too. He won the Gargarian Cup, the championship of the KHL. So kind of a common theme here with some Russian prospects for the Leafs. And then the two defensemen at the bottom there too are guys I'm really excited about. And Noah Chadwick, who's 6'4" left shot defenseman, drafted last year in the 6th round. He went from putting up 20 points in 67 games to 56 in 66. So that's an incredible offensive trajectory for this guy who I don't think was drafted because of his offense. And then Cade Weber, like good asset management there to pick this guy up, broke the shot blocking record in the NCAA. So I there's a lot of accolades throughout this prospect pool, and as a Leafs fan, I'm genuinely pretty excited about a lot of these guys.
Yeah, there's actually a bit of versatility the more you look into it. There's a lot of guys that fit different roles of what types of prospects different people will be into. So, would you like a guy like Kay Weber, maybe the future kind of Chris Tanev prototype for your team? Do you like the high octane forwards like the Easton Cowans or the Grabyankins, the small skill guys? Do you like the goaltenders with finesse, or do you like the goaltenders with like the size like Hildeby? There's a lot of people that can be pleased by looking at this prospect list. As in years past, I felt like the Leafs kind of had their type, and they kept going to that type, for better or for worse.
Yeah, no, that's very accurate. I really like that. The versatility is a great way to put it. And then on top of that, like even a couple of the guys in the honorable mentions there, like I'm also pretty happy with. Like Hervinen's a guy that unfortunately for me, I think Hervinen and Niemela might end up projecting more AHL players as opposed to NHL players, which is really unfortunate to say, but I do think that's a reality. Quillen, we don't know what we have with him yet, but anytime you can add a prospect from the NCAA for free, you should probably do it. So decent signing there. We'll see what we have. Far too early to tell. And then Turfberg had a very impressive rookie season in the AHL. So another name to just look out for if you're a Leafs fan. There's lots of guys. It's a lot deeper than you might think for a team that's been in, I don't know if I want to say contention, but that's been in the mix for a good number of years, always making the playoffs. All right. So the next aspect of this video is taking a look at the recent rumors surrounding the Maple Leafs draft. So this is courtesy of Leafs latest. So thank you for that. Summarizing it all here in one great spot for us. So the Leafs held interviews apparently with 6 players, and they also had a private workout with 6 players. So whether these are the same 6 players, we don't know. I would honestly kind of doubt that based on the names listed here. But the 6 players that they apparently had discussions with are Cole Eiserman, Stian Solberg, Jack Pridham, Lucas Pettersson, EJ Emery, and Andrew Bash, as you can see on the screen there. So, any of these guys stick out to you at all, Nick?
I think the first one pretty obvious. Looking at Cole Eiserman, based on the Leafs holding the 23rd overall pick. If Cole Eiserman falls to that, that should be an automatic run up to the stage pick. I don't think that's happening per se, because 58 goals in 57 games is really hard to fall to 23 in your draft year. But it'd be great if it happened. Other guys include Lucas Pettersson, playing in the J20 National in Sweden. He reminds me of a bit of Liam Ogren, the prospect from the Minnesota Wild system who went in the late first. So guys like that I think would do really well in the NHL as a future guy. Andrew Basha played in the WHL as well with Gavin McKenna. Not as many minutes as I thought originally by playing with Gavin McKenna. He was sort of in a different line approach, but he also did really well both with and without superstars on his team. So I like that about him.
Yeah, man. I mean, the interesting thing here for me with the Cole Eiserman addition in this list is, uh, do we start speculating that the Leafs are trying to trade up to get this guy, or because I think there's no chance in hell that he falls all the way to 23 at the Leafs. He's just too good of a goal scorer. Even with some other warts in his game, you're not gonna ignore the goal scoring ability, and he's gonna go in the top 15 in my books at least. But you never know. It is good that they're doing their due diligence on a guy that maybe they think can fall to them. But some other names of note here are Jack Pridham, Brandon Pridham's son, if you didn't know that. So pretty interesting that they're speaking. Got to wonder if it's kind of more of a favor to the dad as opposed to a legitimate prospect at this pick. But hey, with a later pick, who knows? At the end of the day, this is a guy who, on Elite Prospects, you can see him ranked between 71 and 175. So he's really all over the place. He played in the BCHL last year, so really not the best league to be drafted out of, but we have seen some guys come out of there like Tyson Jost in the past, so definitely not outside of the realm of possibility, but also just kind of a surprising addition to this list, in my opinion.
Yeah, it does feel like the one outlier compared to all the other guys who
Hmm.
are projected first round picks.
Yeah.
But with the family connection and the familiarity that there should be there, I mean, it's just sort of a follow up at this point, I'd assume. But at the same time, he did have a decent year in the BCHL, putting up 49 and 54, and then having a decent playoffs where he put up 8 goals in 10 games. So this is a guy who's going to go to, I believe, Boston University next year in the NCAA. So the way to go would be BCHL and then there instead of playing for the WHL in that matter. So he kept his college eligibility, and now he can prove himself and be a top NCAA recruit, hopefully in the future.
Yeah, for sure. He's also 6'1", so he's got decent size. So it's kind of, you can see what they might be going for here, but like you said, definitely, as far as I'm concerned, the outlier of the bunch. Pedersen is a good centerman. He's been compared to Michael Backlund. Andrew Basha has comparisons to Vincent Trocheck. So those are all guys that you'd love to have on your team. And as for Pridham, it's pretty hard to project because he's playing in the BCHL, and I, to be quite honest, I didn't even know Brandon Pridham had a kid until I saw this tweet a while ago. So it's it's an interesting thing where who knows, maybe he could be a steal later on, but I definitely hope that they're not considering taking him with the 23rd overall pick personally. I just think that would be a bit too big of a reach. And I know it kind of bit us in the butt saying that Easton Cowan was a reach last year. And I guess if they have their guy, they should just go with him. But it seems like this guy's going to be available in the third round. So I would not be taking him here at 23. All right. So as that's going to do it for the rumors here. We're going to get into the top five targets that I have chosen for the Toronto Maple Leafs 23rd overall pick here. So you're going to see a different range of players here, but at the end of the day, these are all players that I like or I think that they might draft, and we'll get into that now. So at number five, we have EJ Emery, the massive defenseman out of the U.S. National Development Program. Um, what do you know about this guy, Nick?
Yeah, so this is one of the many risers of defensemen.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this draft is sort of manipulating their critics because it's getting this crop of defensemen who are at the top of the draft. Like you got the Dickinson, the Parex, and the Bouillams, and that. And there's a gap. Like there's a big gap. So these defensemen, if somebody thinks that's the next best defenseman, these guys are climbing the rankings, and their consolidated ranking has now gone all the way up to 29, where this guy might have been like mid second a couple months
Yeah.
ago. So this is it's interesting because there's no hockey in between now and then. Like there's really like their seasons were over and people are still like rewatching and going back to it. So what have they seen in this guy? I see in EJ Emery, I see a guy who is a decent skater, very physical, able to be part of the play and be the sacrificial defenseman. But as you can see by the points there, he's nothing special on the offensive side of the game yet. He's still just barely 18. So as you can see those comps, Cameron, what do you think of those comps?
I mean, I saw the Brandon Carlo comp in the Elite Prospect draft guide, and to be honest, I thought that was a little optimistic. So I kind of wanted to ground it in a bit more reality with another comp there. So I put Will Borgen, who is a great third pair defenseman in this league. The Leafs have been in rumors about Will Borgen for 2 or 3 years here to acquire this guy because of how well he does his role. But I think that's a much more projectable style of play for EJ Emery in the NHL. I think Brandon Carlo is a bit more versatile than Emery is going to end up being long term because at the end of the day, I kind of think that Emery has little to no offensive upside at this point in time. Like the one promising thing he did show was he put up 6 assists in 7 U18 games. So that is pretty promising. But I mean, it's pretty easy to put up points like that when you're playing on a loaded team like the US had. So like with Cole Eiserman, Teddy Stiga, Trevor Connolly, the list goes on and on and on. So all he really had to do was clear the puck out of the neutral zone or the defensive zone and get it to the forwards in that instance. So this is a guy that I know a lot of people really want the Leafs to draft, and it makes sense because he's an absolute physical specimen. He tore up the draft combine. Elite Prospects has him ranked as the fourth best shutdown defender and the third best neutral zone defender. So it's clear what side of the ice his emphasis is on, and it's exactly what the Leafs need. It just worries me that there's no offensive upside, and that's why I'd caution Leafs fan to maybe reel it in a little bit on EJ Emery, and that's why he's listed here at number five, and he's not higher up this list. So, like I said, like if he ends up being the pick at 23, I'm not going to be upset. I'll be happy because we got a massive physical right shot defenseman, which we sorely need. But I just don't think EJ Emery's the guy for me personally.
Yeah, the question is, can you get this kind of mold out of like a 30-year-old, 1 year minimum league minimum contract? Someone like Radko Gudas got a big payday, but that's the kind of type that I'm thinking of a guy who
Labushkin.
Labushkin. That's exactly
Yeah.
what the Leafs have sort of done in recent years is go to that mold to play with a skilled guy like Morgan Riley. So thinking of EJ Emery is like, is he going to improve his game or is this who he is? So I'm excited to see the next couple of years of his development because if the Leafs do want this kind of guy at 23, he will have that first round pressure and pedigree
Mhm.
to go into the next couple of years of his development.
Yeah, for sure. And sometimes that works out, sometimes it doesn't. Like if you look for Easton Cowan, people talked about the pressure with him, and I think it actually motivated him, fueled him to become a better player. So who knows? Like I said, if Emery's the pick, I'm not going to be upset. He is number five on my list for a reason, but it's mainly because I kind of think he's going to be the pick, and it's okay, but I think he's probably the most likely pick that they're going to make at this point, just based off what people are saying and projecting the Leafs roster out 2, 3 years from now. But for me personally, if the guys I want are available, he's not the guy that I'm going to be picking at number 23. So that brings us to the fourth ranked target for the Leafs at number 23, which is the Norwegian defenseman Stian Solberg. This guy, you want to talk about late risers, Nick. This guy shot up draft boards here in the past month or so.
Yeah, it's almost like he's not going to even be available at 23 now that we're talking about this. Like a couple weeks ago, a couple months ago, he's, floating around the 30s. So the reason for this is because of his recent performances and the ability to provide offense as well as his physicality. He's one of the best hitters in the draft. Everyone who follows these prospects is really clear on that he is a level above most physical defensemen, despite only being like a 6'2", 200-pound. Like, this is not the 6'5" tower. This is a mobile and physical guy. So this is someone that's already played in the men's league as well. As a 17-year-old, he played in the men's league and he succeeded. So happy to see him be here at number 4.
Yeah, for me, I have bolded in my notes, unlikely to be available. That's the reason he's number 4. If I thought he was going to be available, he'd be number 1 or number 2, hands down. I love this guy. He's funny, he's charismatic, and he plays the game the way that Brad Treliving loves. Brad Treliving loves his defensemen who are physical. They stop plays before they even happen. This is the type of guy you'd be getting in Stian Solberg. And it's my personal opinion that, like you said, Nick, there's that elite group of defensemen in the draft. There's 6 guys. There's Levshinov, Salayev, Buyum, Dickinson, Perek, forgetting one here. Oh, Yakimchuk. Those are the big 6 in this draft. I think Stian Solberg is the 7th best defenseman, in my opinion. I think he has shot up the draft board for good reason. Like, if you're looking at his stats recently, so at the World Championship playing against men, he put up 2 goals and 3 points in 7 games as a defensive-minded physical defenseman. I like that is pretty promising in my opinion for a guy who's really not focused on that side of the puck that much. And on top of that, in in the Norwegian playoffs for his team there, he put up 9 points in 17 playoff games, which is a way higher point per game pace than the entire season. I think he had like maybe 15 points in 40 some games in the regular season, but he went to almost half a point per game, or actually, sorry, above half a point per game in the playoffs. So raising his game when the stakes are the highest, I, this is a guy that, like you said, he's not going to be available, so don't get your hopes up, Leafs fans. But just had to throw him here because of how much I love this player. And what can you say about those comps there too, Nick?
Yeah, those are two of the, one of the biggest, most, I guess, notable hitters in the NHL, Jacob Trouba and Radko Gudas. Those are always those highlights of the craziest hits in probably you've ever seen. So Stian Solberg will likely add to that list and add to those video highlights. Whether or not it's his offense, I think more often than not, it'll be his hits.
For sure. And I mean, I know Jacob Trouba is a guy who's had his name kind of dragged through the mud recently based off his play in the recent playoffs, but you got to remember, like, he is still a good defenseman in this league, and what he brings is valuable to his team. And regardless of the fluctuations in his play, he's still a very good defenseman. And if you could get Jacob Trouba at a reduced rate on any team, I think any team would take him. Like, so it's more about the money he's being paid as opposed to the actual player itself. So I think that kind of gets lost in the shuffle sometimes. So don't think of Jacob Trouba comp as a diss or anything like that here. To me, it's actually a great compliment, and I'd be very happy if Stian Solberg modeled his game after Jacob Trouba. Moving on to the third overall target, and we are going to move from a defenseman to a forward with right winger Ryder Ritchie. This is a guy that I'm very high on, as you know, Nick, and I don't. It's almost unexplicable. I just love the way this guy plays. Having watched him with the U18s, he's just an absolute water bug out there, and that's where he doesn't have the upside skill that a guy like Seth Jarvis has, but it's just the fact that he's always involved in the play, and it just seems like he's able to create space for himself out there when it doesn't look like there's any. Like, this guy was scoring goals from odd angles and all this kind of stuff at the U18s. I was really, really impressed with him.
Yeah, this is a guy you've been in my ear about for the whole season, and I finally have come around to I can see where you're coming from. This is a guy who, yeah, as you said, engaged in the play at all times. And I think his best trait is to make stick plays with space when he has space. So I'm curious in like the higher levels of competition, is he going to be able to make the stick plays when there's less space? I also question his skating slightly. I think his skating's a little unstable. He feels like he's like a little jaunty. I guess he's gonna like fall over sometimes, but I mean that can be fixed when you're 17. It can't be really fixed when you're like 22. So let's see over the next 2 to 3 years, does Toronto have the resources to get this guy as like the raw person that he is into this superstar that he could actually be at 23 overall?
Well, I mean, that really plays into it is the fact that I think very highly of Toronto's development staff and their development process. They've really pumped out a lot of NHL caliber players. A lot of them leave, but they've really developed a lot of NHL caliber players. And Ryder Ritchie here is, I believe, the youngest player in this entire slide deck at 17.1. Like he just turned 17. So he's got so much more room to grow in so many different ways. This year he was limited to 47 games, as you can see there, due to what they're calling a lower body injury. So not exactly sure what that was. But this is a guy who a year ago in his 16-year-old season had an incredible year. And so he took a little bit of a step back this year. So for me, if you do take Ryder Ritchie at 23 or whoever does end up taking him, it's more based off of the pedigree and the past as opposed to this most recent season. Although, honestly, he put up 4 goals and 8 points in 7 games to U18s. So he is still doing it right now. It's just a matter if he took a little bit of a step back in this WHL season, but it's the upside here that is just so tantalizing for me. Like I think in a like this guy could end up being a first line right winger. I think more likely he ends up being a second liner, but the other thing is at the Hlinka Gretzky tournament a year or so ago, the U18 there, he was Canada's best player at that tournament. He essentially won them the championship with 3 goals and 9 points in 5 games. So this is a guy that's proved he can do it, and he can be like the best player on a championship team at the international level. So this is why I've been so high on this guy. And I think if you're going for boom bust in this range, there's nobody I'd rather have than Ryder Ritchie personally.
Yeah, and it's not even like bust. Like this, the floor is still quite high for Ryder Ritchie. He's still playing as a 17-year-old, like you said, in the WHL, so one of the top leagues in the world at his age. And I just think that yeah, there's a lot of potential in this player. He's really active with the puck and really likes to play with the puck. That's a really good start for somebody that you want on your hockey team in the pro level.
Yeah, for sure. I also love the Arturi Lehkonen comp as well that we have there. It's just because of the way that this guy forechecks. Like on Team Canada at the U18s, Iginla was far and away the best forechecker. But I think Ryder Ritchie might have been right there at number two with some of the other guys like Cole Boudouin. So a really great player to have on your team. And the only thing that does concern me a little bit is he might be a little too similar to a guy like Easton Cowan that they just picked up, similar in size, similar in play style. So maybe that steers them away from Ryder Ritchie, but the comparisons for this guy are all over the place. Online when I was trying to figure it out, I heard Nietzsche's, Konechny, Raymond, Ridley Gregg. Like it's all over the place. It seems like nobody can really project this guy, and sometimes that's scary and scares teams away from players. Whereas uh, in this instance, I think it's exciting personally because he's a late first round pick. You're not going to be wasting a lottery pick on this guy. All right. Recently mentioned just a second ago, but our number two target for the Maple Leafs at number 23 is the big centerman Cole Boudouin from the Barrie Colts in the OHL. Uh, how much do you like this guy, Nick?
He's a very interesting case because I think he should have had a better draft year offensively personally because of his play style. It just feels like he's one of those guys that can be efficient and effective. And I was just surprised looking back at it that he didn't even cross a point a game. But we're looking at guys like Ryder Ritchie as well. He didn't reach that either. But in the OHL, one of the top junior leagues that you can be in your draft year, I really liked his play style on a Barrie team that was sort of middling throughout the year. And I don't know what to think of Cole Baudouin besides of like the energy and the ability to like just push through any of the negatives.
Yeah, for me, it all comes down to the fact that this guy's so responsible defensively already at such a young age. Like again, he's a younger prospect. He's under 17 and a half years old there. So at the U18s, this was a guy who was really tasked with shutting down the other team's best players, playing in more of a two-way role. And he really seemed to embrace that. And kind of there was no skip in his step where he was able to step into that role and really play that. And that was really promising for me because I think that's the kind of role he's going to play in the NHL. I don't think this guy's going to be a first liner. He might be a second liner, but in all reality, I think he's probably projects to be a third liner, like the comparables we had there, Nicholas Waugh and Nick Paul. And honestly, if you're getting one of those two guys at 23rd, I think you're pretty happy. And I think it's a pretty direct comparison for Cole Baudouin. He's a fantastic forechecker. Elite Prospects had him ranked in their poll as the highest motor in the entire draft. So you know he gets after it on the offensive side and the defensive side. So he's a great two-way forward, and I'd be very happy if he was the pick here for the Leafs.
Yeah, and like I said, like he pushes away all the negatives by the fact that he's just ready to grind anything out, no matter the circumstance. You see the A on his jersey there. He likely could just be
Yep.
the captain next year. Like he is this kind of guy that just you want on your hockey team. You want in the room. You want on the ice. It's not just in the room. It's not just on the ice. Like he's valuable as part of the franchise, as a leader, and as a player that just you can ride or die with, kind of thing.
Yeah, and you might start to notice a trend here, but this is another guy who had a very great Glinka Gretzky tournament for Canada a year ago when they won it all. He had 3 goals, 6 points in 5 games. So he has shown that offensive upside you're speaking to there, Nick. But again, like I don't think long term that really projects to be his role. But that's been an issue with the Leafs for a long time, is they have these guys that are only good at defense. You look at a guy like David Kampf, some of the other names that have come through that bottom six, Zach Aston Reese. These guys are only good at defense. They don't contribute anything offensively. So when you get a guy who can play two-way like Cole Baudouin, I think it's incredibly valuable. And he's a 6'2" centerman. So this guy, I would be over the moon if he was the pick at number 23 for the Leafs. Moving on to the number one draft target for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Drum roll, please. We are going to have Charlie Elick, the 6'3" right shot defenseman from the Brandon Wheat Kings in the WHL. This is another guy that I've been in your ear a little bit about that I'm really high on, and luckily for me and hopefully for Leafs fans, you were pretty high on him as well too, right?
Yep, I think he's going to be a top four defenseman in the NHL. You look at the base stats there, about half a point a game for a defenseman. It's not nothing terrible. We've seen some defensemen today with different offensive abilities based on their junior stats. But I have comps as like Chris Tanev, Braden Schneider, Carson Soucy. You see there, Braden McNabb. These are guys that are longtime NHLers, sustainable NHLers, and just somebody that you just want on your team, especially with the right shot being sort of the meta in the modern NHL.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Elite Prospects also had a guy like Caden Gooley. I think my favorite comp so far has been that Braden McNabb one. I believe it was Craig Button or somebody like that said it on a broadcast at the U18s. But to me, it's like you said, Nick, the difference between Elick and Emery, which I think Emery might be the most likely pick for the Leafs right now, but Elick would be my preferred, is the fact that Elick is I think he projects to be a top four defenseman, like you said. Whereas Emery, I think, is going to be a third pair guy, like a Will Borgen. Like I think we might be splitting hairs a little bit here if we're comparing between Braden McNabb and Will Borgen, but I do think that there is a difference, and that Charlie Elick projects to be more of a second pair defenseman. And listening to people talk about him, he's not your prototypical offensive guy, but he is able to make a great first pass, get the puck out of the zone. So he's all right in transition. He's not going to hold your team back from that instance. What he does struggle with is handling the puck and holding on to it. So you will see him getting the puck off his stick quickly, which, I mean, if you're not confident holding on to it, isn't necessarily a bad thing. But if we're going by those polls that the elite prospects, has their writers do, this guy was popping up all over them. Like I didn't see any other guy like near the top or in the middle of like 3 or 4 or 5 of those things. Elick was ranked the second best neutral zone defender, the second best shutdown defender, and the fifth hardest hitter. So, I mean, it just seems like he's incredibly well rounded in the things that the Leafs have been like just starving for on their team for the past number of years. And like you said, with those point totals there, I think it shows a much higher offensive upside than a guy like EJ Emery. So I think that, and then I also look at a guy like Noah Chadwick, who the Leafs just drafted, and he went from 20 points to 56 points. And I think that's a pretty projectable trajectory for Charlie Elick to follow. Now, I have heard the guys at Dobber Prospects say Brandon doesn't really place an emphasis on having their defensemen play offensively, so that could play into it as well. But at the end of the day, I definitely think this guy is going to be a top four defenseman in the league, and he's definitely one of my top 10 defensemen in this draft, and I think he's the right guy for the Toronto Maple Leafs at number 23.
Yeah, it's all about simplicity when you look at these guys. With your 23rd overall pick in this draft, do you want a guy like Ryder Ritchie? We talked about the idea of being boomer bust with a higher floor still, but boomer bust, or do you want a certainty? Or Charlie Elick versus EJ Emery, I think Charlie Elick has that certainty, but also has the upside, where EJ Emery has a bit of certainty, but a bit of upside. I think it's just not as much as Charlie Elick. It comes down to Charlie Elick's simplicity, Charlie Elick's decision making, and that's why he's had the offensive ability this year. 4 goals, 23 assists. Like, that's not going to come just by being on the ice. That's going to come from making good decisions with the puck when you have it. Whether or not he's able to hold on to the puck and be like, you're not asking for Cale Makar at 23rd overall. You're asking for Charlie Elick to be himself and know himself well. If he knows himself well, that'll make him the best possible player in the future because he can understand his own strength and his own weaknesses.
No, I love that word, simplicity. I would say that's kind of the vein of almost all of these picks here, is the fact that I think in past years, the Leafs have had a tendency to, for whatever reason, kind of overthink these picks and go for those high upside guys like Sandin, Liljegren, like Cowan last year. And even though some of those have worked out, don't get me wrong, I think a team that is in playoff contention, you see a lot of these teams like Vegas or whoever, they draft guys who are really close to being NHL ready, very projectable. And I think in the long run, for a team that wants to contend, that will help them a lot more than taking a bunch of boom bust guys and hitting on maybe 50% of them. Like, at the end of the day, I think at 23 here, you need to get an NHL player. And I think that Charlie Elick is 1000% going to be an NHL player. And I'd really bet that he's going to be a top four defenseman. So that will wrap it up for the top five targets. And then just kind of a look at uh, everyone else. So these are the people that missed the list. They weren't included, but still guys that I could see the Leafs picking. So just some names of interest for me here are there's a bunch of really solid power forwards available, like Liam Greentree, Igor Chernyshov, Sasha Boisvert, and then a guy like Emil Hemming. I highly doubt Greentree will be available at 23. He's another guy where if he is, you probably want to run up there and draft him. But of those guys, I really am starting to grow fond of Sasha Boisvert, the 6'2" centerman there. I think he's playing out of the USHL at the moment, but personally for me, very similar to the vein of Cole Boudouin. Didn't seem logical to have them both in the top five targets, but if Boudouin is gone, then Sasha Boisvert, if that's the mold they're going for, great option there too.
Yeah, absolutely. And one player I like to mention is Alphonse Friedge. He's risen at my personal draft board. I think if his ability with the puck is elite, I think it's one of the highest out of all the defenders in the draft to be able to handle the puck. We just talked about Charlie Elick's apparent inability to be comfortable with the puck. Alphonse Friedge is the exact opposite. It's almost like he's a forward. Similar to like Harrison Brunicky. Like, these guys are really comfortable skating with the puck, with a vision and being able to set up plays, be a power play guy, all the things you would want in a modern defenseman. So I really like Alphonse Friedge, and look out for him at the draft.
Yeah, and the last guy I'll mention is you see a lot of right shot D there. That's obviously an organizational need for the Leafs. The one other guy I really like that I is probably number 6 for me with a guy like Boisvert is Dominic Bedinka. You see the comp there, Mackenzie Weegar. God, I'd love to have that on the Leafs. 6'3", big boy. So he'd be a great pick there too. So I think as far as the players who might be available, who are going to be available, I think that pretty much covers all of them. And if the pick at 23 is not somebody who is on this list or one of the 5 we just went through, I would be pretty surprised. So we'll have to wait and see where the Leafs decide to go. That's the one great thing about them is they'll always leave us guessing. Nobody had them taking Easton Cowan last year. So make sure you're watching the draft until pick number 23 at least as a Leafs fan. And it's going to be a very, very exciting draft. Thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and be on the lookout for more videos, and let us know who you'd like the Leafs to pick at number 23. Thanks again.